Welcome to Holme Horror. I've been waiting for you. Buried. Great Falls was the kind of town where secrets thrived. Its forested outskirts, peppered with old cemeteries and forgotten trails, seemed to soak up the whispers of the past. People came and went, but some simply vanished, lost to the woods or something more sinister. For the residents, the disappearances were unsettling, but the lack of evidence kept them from connecting the dots. No one suspected that beneath the soil, among the roots and worms, a nightmare was unfolding. Robert Mallory arrived in Great Falls a year prior, taking over an old creaky house on the edge of the woods. Reclusive and soft-spoken, Robert was polite when addressed but rarely initiated conversation. He worked odd jobs, repairing fences and cleaning gutters, blending into the background. But Robert had a dark secret. Beneath the floorboards of his home lay a small private workshop, meticulously outfitted with plans, tools, and photographs. He wasn't just a loner, he was a predator, and he had a specific, horrifying obsession. He loved the sound of screaming. Not ordinary screams of fear or anger. Robert craved the panicked, muffled cries of people who realized they were trapped with no hope of escape. The kind of screams only the earth could contain. Sarah Whitman, a local waitress, was the first to notice Robert's peculiar habits. She'd seen him at her diner, staring blankly at his plate, and once at the hardware store, purchasing a strange assortment of items: shovels, nails, and wooden planks. Her curiosity turned into concern when her younger brother, Mark, disappeared. He'd been last seen jogging near the woods. A search party combed the area, but found nothing. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Robert might know something. One evening, she decided to confront him. She drove to his house, her heart pounding as she approached the porch. The house seemed deserted, its windows dark and lifeless. As she knocked on the door, it creaked open. "Hello?" she called, stepping inside. The air smelled damp, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. Sarah's eyes scanned the sparse furniture and the odd scratches on the walls. She was about to turn back when she heard it. A faint, muffled scream. "Mark?" she whispered, panic surging through her. The sound was coming from beneath her feet. Robert returned home moments later, catching Sarah in the act of prying up the floorboards. He moved with shocking speed, grabbing her by the hair and slamming her head against the wall. When Sarah awoke, she found herself strapped to a table in Robert's workshop. The room was dimly lit, with tools hanging on the walls and an old cassette recorder sitting on a nearby shelf. "You shouldn't have come here," Robert said, his voice calm and eerily gentle. He pulled out a wooden coffin, unfinished but functional, and began lining it with heavy plastic. "Where's Mark?" Sarah screamed, struggling against the restraints. "He's where he needs to be," Robert replied, not looking at her. "You'll see soon enough." Robert explained his twisted reasoning as he worked. To him, life was about control, about silencing the chaos of the world. Burials were his form of art, his way of preserving purity. He relished the thought of his victims screaming in the dark, their voices swallowed by the earth. He played a tape for Sarah, a recording of Mark's frantic cries as he struggled in his coffin. Her stomach turned, bile rising in her throat. "You're sick," she spat. "No," Robert said with a smile. "I'm meticulous." Robert worked with frightening efficiency. He loaded Sarah into the coffin, securing her wrists and ankles with duct tape before nailing the lid shut. Darkness enveloped her, and the sound of his hammering echoed like gunshots. She felt herself being dragged, the coffin scraping against the ground. When the motion stopped, the sound of dirt falling onto the lid filled her ears. Panic consumed her. Sarah screamed until her throat was raw, kicking and thrashing against the confines. But it was useless. The air grew stifling and her vision blurred as she teetered on the edge of unconsciousness. Then she heard it, a voice. "Sarah?" It was Mark. Robert had buried Sarah near her brother, a twisted mockery of a reunion. Mark's voice was faint but unmistakable, coming from a coffin nearby. "Mark, I'm here." Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her face. I can't breathe," he gasped. "I've been here for—" His voice broke into sobs, Sarah's heart raced as she realized the full extent of Robert's depravity. He'd created an underground graveyard, each coffin a soundproof prison for his victims. She could hear faint cries from others, muffled and distant. A symphony of despair. Desperation surged through her. She screamed, pounded, and kicked, but the coffin held firm. The oxygen was running out, and with every passing second, hope slipped further away. Sarah's disappearance didn't go unnoticed. Her co-workers reported her missing, and the police began investigating. They quickly connected her to Robert Mallory, the quiet man on the edge of town. When officers arrived at his house, Robert was gone, leaving behind a meticulously cleaned workshop. But the search dogs picked up a scent leading into the woods. It took hours for them to uncover the first coffin. Inside was Sarah, unconscious but alive. The team worked frantically, digging up more graves. They found Mark and several others, but not all were as lucky. Many coffins were empty, their occupants reduced to skeletal remains. The sheer scale of Robert's crimes shocked the community. He'd been operating for years, preying on hikers, travelers, and locals. Months passed, and life in Grey Falls began to return to normal. Sarah struggled to recover from her ordeal, haunted by nightmares of the coffin and the darkness. One night, she woke to a strange sound, a soft tapping, like nails on wood. Her heart raced as she listened. The sound was coming from beneath her bed. She leapt out, grabbing a flashlight and hesitantly lifting the mattress. There was nothing there, just the bare floorboards. But the tapping continued. Sarah's breath hitched as she realized it wasn't coming from inside her room. It was coming from beneath the house. She called the police, who arrived within minutes. They searched the crawl space and found something horrifying. A freshly dug hole and an empty coffin. Robert Mallory's voice echoed in Sarah's mind, his final words to her before he'd locked her in the coffin. "You're one of mine now. You'll never escape me." The police assured Sarah she was safe, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, as she tried to sleep, the tapping returned, louder this time. It was followed by a soft whisper, "Time to come home." The next morning, Sarah's house was empty. The front door hung open and her bed was neatly made. In the woods, a fresh grave awaited. Inside, Sarah's body lay in peaceful silence, her face frozen in terror. On the lid of her coffin was a note, scrawled in Robert's neat handwriting, "Perfection preserved." Robert Mallory was never caught, but Grey Falls would never forget the sound of his victims' screams, buried deep beneath the earth. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories. And remember, be careful. I'll be watching you.